Hi, good people of the world. Welcome to this week's Boxes of Shame, where I, Leif Westerholm, try my best to paint a miniature for my D&D game. This week's miniature broke all size records that I've painted before. But before we get into that, I want to ask you a favor. I want you, if you like these videos that I put out every week, to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and remember, hit that bell icon so you know whenever I put out a new video. This is an excellent way for you to help support this channel. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Let no joyful voice be heard. Let no man look up to the sky with hope. And let this day be cursed for we who ready to wake. The Kraken. A couple of years ago I started getting into D&D. As my passion for D&D grew, so did my collection of minis, and like many others out there, I now have boxes of shame. Legions of unpainted minis. Now this is my underdog story. This is me painting every single one of my miniatures. Alright, so this is the Kraken from Reaper Bones. This must be the largest mini I've ever actually gotten my hands on. So, opening this little bugger was quite easy, but as you can see, it took the entire frame to actually sort of get it, and I have a pretty good lens, so yeah. But opening this little bugger, you can clearly see that it comes in a multitude of parts. And I think this is part of the Reaper Bones 1 or 2. It's before they made the switch to, I think they're called Reaper Black. Here you can see the artwork. I actually saved that because I figured I want to be inspired by that. The mini itself comes in, so the whole body sort of comes in two parts, as you can see there, and that ship, or the top of the ship, really confused me at one point, because I was just a little bit confused like why it was there, but then I figured out that, you know what, the Kraken actually, you need to sort of skewer it on the front mast of the ship. You can see that there's a little beak on the head part, and I'm sort of just trying to, and I really urge you to dry fit everything, even though I there failed, everything came crashing down. But at this point I think I really wanted to just sort of get all of the plastic out of the way and start sort of looking at the parts. And also I bought sort of custom for this a base, and I think this base is a good sort of 6 squares in diameter at least. So looking at the model, there were quite a lot of mold lines actually. I was actually surprised compared to Gorma, which I painted a couple of weeks back. This one had more mold lines, I would say, or at least they were more visible. Then again, this one came in more parts probably as well. I even went to the length of taking the tentacles. There's, I think, 10 in total. And here in the beginning, I'm sort of using different sort of citadel scrapers and my hobby knife. If you have, I would suggest using a round file instead. You'll notice that I'll switch to that later on. Simply because the round file, I guess, for me at least, it was more simple to get rid of the majority of the mold lines, and it actually created less debris that was hanging on. You can see there was quite a lot of sort of plastic that came off this poor Kraken. Now I'm trying this out, this base and the whole sort of ship. Also, what you didn't see there was that I actually dry fitted the ship onto the base and then the body of the Kraken, just to see that everything was in balance. So I knew at this point that I wanted actually the ship to be quite a lot to one side, because the Kraken will come sort of bent over it, so the balance will be better. Here I'm using for the first time in my life, what do you call that? super glue activator or something like that. It basically hardens the glue like in a matter of well, almost instantaneously, I would say. So here I'm just gluing the ship bit by bit, making sure that everything has a good snug fit. And then once that was dry and so on, I come in with a heck of a lot of PVA glue and just pretty much cover the base, and you can guess what I'm gonna do here. Some simple basing, and the way I wanted to do this was sort of a, I guess, sandy basing, because there's multitudes of ways of doing this mini. You could do it like that it's sort of coming out of the water, and I was contemplating using sort of a lot of water effect, but it doesn't make sense. There's a sunken ship and it needs to be on the bottom of the sort of sea. You can also see that I lock everything in as per usual with diluted PVA glue afterwards. And now I'm sort of starting to sort of glue the entire Kraken together. So first comes the sort of, I think it's called the carapace, or the sort of the shells. And it's kind of a, I like this model, but it's kind of weird because the Kraken looks a little bit more, I'm gonna have to say, almost shrimp-like or something like that. But the funny thing is, I'm gonna use this in an upcoming salt marsh adventure. So, and I'm not going to use it as a Kraken, actually. I'm going to use it as a juvenile Kraken, which is kind of nice, because I even in the artwork from Wizards of the Coast, it doesn't resemble at all the Kraken model, the official Kraken model. So here I also dry fitted all of the arms, or all of the tentacles, very important, and then bit by bit I just glue them in. Make sure that all of them are in the right position, and make sure also, if you're going to use the ship, to have your arms positioned in a good way. I don't know if it was skill or if it was pure dumb luck, but mine actually sort of fit fairly well, and I got exactly what I wanted. It looks threatening, and it looks like it's sort of grabbing a hold almost of the boat, a little bit like probably an octopus would. It would use its environment. And you can see quite a lot of work with this, making sure everything fits. But once I'd done that, I made sure not to glue the actual Kraken to the base, because that's among the last things we do. So, coming to Reaper Bones, I don't know why, but for some reason it seems like Army Painter seems to do the job. And here you can see I've constructed some sort of a, some sort of a way of managing to hold this thing without holding it. Here I'm just coming in with some Zenithal priming. I think I'm using Citadel Bone Wraith color or something like that. I just wanted a little bit of a hint of a brighter color coming from up above. So I decided to start with the actual sort of the simplest of tasks, which was basically painting out the ship. So I'm coming in here with some sort of brown color from Army Painter. And you can see that I'm really having problems with getting good coverage, to be honest. So that had to at least be like two coats or so. Here I'm using the same color and then mixing in some yellow for the upper part of the ship. It looked in the artwork like it was almost made of gold or something like that, and I didn't want to go, that fancy, but I figured at least, have some color variation, so you would have, brighter and darker wood. I have been known to create terrain and whatnot, and this to me felt very much like the same sort of idea when you painted it. I wanted to have some color variation, but I knew that eventually I would gonna come in with some dry brushing. Now, I used the existing color that I had in the palette, and I sort of added some colors, a little bit of white to brighten it, and then a little bit of sort of, I think it's called hemp rope. It's some sort of like brown greenish. Here you can see I'm going totally nuts with the wet palette there. I'm really just trying to get some sort of variation on the sand, and I didn't want to have a lot of details on the sand, because that was sort of supposed to be the baseline essentially to sort of I guess frame everything else in. So in order to give everything a little bit more shade, I'm coming in with some strong tone, I'm coming in with a heck of a lot of strong tone. I am pretty much covering the entire ship, and once the ship was done, I diluted the strong tone, watered it down a little bit, and then I covered the entire ground with it. And this was, of course, when the paint had dried. And this is what we have so far. We're going to let that dry a little bit, I think. So you can notice that I'm keeping a quite aggressive pace, because if I were to show you all of this in detail, this would take forever. I swear to you. So I'm coming in now with some gray dry brushing. Usually the way I do it, when you dry brush wood with gray or anything like that, it gets sort of a very oldish, almost silvery look, which I kind of like, and I really wanted it to look like it's been there for quite some time. I mean, it's half buried into the the sand floor of the ocean, so it's been there for centuries or whatnot. And then to just give it a little bit more of a sort of variation, I'm coming in with some sort of sand color here and there. Just doing my best to sort of give it a little bit more variation. Again, I think variation in terms of what colors you use is super important. I'm actually also at this point painting in the frame, as I usually call it, or the edge of the actual base. So just a little bit black. Really, I don't know why I decided to do it here, because, yeah, I'm not nearly done, but I think I was sort of buying myself a little bit time, because I was still thinking about how I should paint the Kraken. It posed quite a lot of challenges for me. Here, I'm coming in with some yellow, some orange, and some almost almost lime green or very bright green. I'm going to use this because there were some pieces of coral and whatnot on the ship, so I'm just going to try to paint them in colorful tones. And halfway through this, you're going to see that I noticed that, oh, wait a minute, isn't there one color that I sort of forgotten, which I fixed. So I'm just sort of trying to make it a little bit random where they are, because these are just color spots. I'm not going for sort of super realism. I'm more going for fun. And yeah, here you can see I'm coming in with some sort of blue-green from Vallejo. I'm just sort of taking a couple of those barnacles and corals or whatever they were. I'm not a marine biologist, so I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to vegetation and whatnot, but yeah. This is what we have, and it's looking kind of nice. All of the corals are popping fairly nice, and they look colorful, and they're gonna sort of juxtapose the Kraken. So, starting on the Kraken, looking at the sort of the box art and whatnot, I saw that the actual sort of shell of it was sort of in some sort of grayish material. So I started with that, with a color from Army Painter, and again you can see that the coverage isn't very good, but a couple of coats and later and it's good. I decided to also use, because the shells sort of continue out on each tentacle, so I decided that should have the same sort of coloration, just to get a good variation, because I knew I was going to come in with some red, purple, fleshy tones when it came to its body, when it came to its sort of tentacles partly and whatnot. Here you can see I'm struggling with keeping this up, but I found a stick eventually. And now I'm gonna try, and I saw this at Luke's APS, because he also painted this up. You should have a look at that. He did a really nice job. He probably spent a tenth of the time. He used some purple wash from Army Painter. So I thought that, that looked kind of nice. I'm gonna decide to do the same. But when I sort of had painted it out, I felt like, This could use a little bit more of a pop, but I was sort of first and foremost trying to do multiple coats, letting it dry and so on and so forth. But I remember specifically feeling that at this point, you know what, it's looking kind of pale, and I don't know if I wanted to build it up or not. But one thing I knew that I wanted to do was to bring in some red tone. So here I'm using some red wash from Army Painter, and I wanted to specifically hit, what do you call those? It looked like it had sort of its jet propelling holes or whatever in the side. I wanted to sort of make them look a little bit more fleshy, and I wanted to sort of mix it up with this sort of a purple tone. And I also wanted to give a little bit of a more reddish shade closer to the head when it came to those I don't know what to call it, that sort of the skin that's in between the tentacles. And yeah, I mean, I'm sort of liking it. I'm creating a nice fade to the belly, which is gonna be white. Fail. Here I think I'm gonna go in with some sort of sandy color, or at least I thought so for a moment. And you can see I chose to keep this just to sort of show you how much trouble it was with this model. Actually, it was quite it wasn't easy, let's just say it like that. It was quite tricky to get all of this model painted. But here I'm coming in with some sort of I guess you would call it a sort of mustard brown, just to get some sort of variation on the arms, and I'm getting a little bit of overspray in the mouth. I knew I was going to come back in and sort of define the inside of the mouth, but I just wanted to sort of get some parts that were more sort of in this sort of mustardy yellow tone. Here, I'm coming in with some red paint from Vallejo, heavy red. I noticed that the octopus had, or the Kraken had gills, so I wanted to just sort of make them a little bit more, I guess, violent red, or what we could say, something like that. And like I said before, I use the same paint just to sort of redefine the redness of the mouth. And this is what we have, and I at this point I'm like, yeah, it's starting to slowly but surely, get a nice sort of tone. Here you can see I'm using the purple wash again, but this time I had recently bought some inks, and you can perhaps see that I used them for the purple worm. Or the Gormar, which I did. So I mixed that in because I knew I wanted a little bit more color on the actual tentacles, on the sort of tips of the tentacles. Because I don't know, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, to be honest, but I knew I just wanted some color variation just to sort of, I think just to sort of bring a little bit more organic feel to them. Because otherwise they would have just looked like, rubber spaghetti or something, and I knew I wanted to have some sort of definition on them, because I wasn't going to use any sort of other effects or whatnot. Now, while I had that ink in there, and the ink is super saturated, meaning that it's very sort of strong in its color, I took the chance and sort of put a little bit in the mouth, put a little bit on that sort of the flaps of skin that are in between its arms and whatnot, and also on the side. And at this point I decided that, you know what, I think I'm happy with the airbrushing so far. I let that dry completely, and this is what we have. You can see looks quite nice. So now to the wash stage. We have a base coat, so I went on and basically took some strong tone all over the carapace. And actually, once I finished the carapace, I also did and the carapace actually was quite tricky, because you had to also take the underside of it, so it was, because there is slight overhang, and be careful not to miss that when you sort of do this. Now, after the carapace, I also took, of course, the shells, or whatever you can call it, the plates that continue out on the actual tentacles. And I don't know if I made a mistake or if I want more definition, but I also sort of took care of that skin that was in between the tentacles. And then these jet propulsive thingamathings, I dotted in some strong tone in them just to create some sort of darkness. And here I'm going totally insane. I'm basically covering the entire mouth with strong tone. And then a little bit of red tone, again hitting the gills specifically because I wanted them to look I think vulnerable, you know, almost like a actual fish's gills that are sort of what do you call it, extended or whatnot. Then you can see that red. When it came to the eyes, I picked out some orange colors, and I started from the darkest orange. First I painted all 6 eyes with the darkest orange, and then you know, progressively I went brighter and brighter and brighter up until the point where I used some yellow actually to the very sort of highest point. And then I came in with some off-white to sort of get all of the teeth, and there's quite a lot of teeth. There's some, or I'm not sure if these are called teeth, but some sort of hooks that looked like teeth. There's some hooks at the end of the tentacles, there's some you know, teeth at the beginning of the tentacles, and of course there's some teeth on his you know, the shell at the end of his body. And then of course there's a heck of a lot of teeth in his mouth. This was a lot of painting teeth, to be honest, but it looks nice. So coming in with some khaki. Basically, once everything dried, I'm dry brushing the entire carapace with some khaki color. You can use any sort of, I guess, more brighter brownish. I went towards this sort of brown sandy color because I felt like it looked more natural, and it looked like it would sort of fit in with also the sort of undercoating that I'd done before. And this is what we have at this point. I'm actually liking this model more and more the more I sort of don't think about all of the problems it gave me and about the result. So all of the teeth, I'm coming in with my favorite combination, Seraphim Sepia. Here I could have been a heck of a lot neater, I can say, but yeah, fail on that one, but it looked okay. So for the beak was unpainted at this point, so I decided to go in with some black first and then try to do a sort of some sort of, you know, highlight with some white. Now, I had recently bought some, I think you call this, we call it in Sweden white moss, but I think it's called lichen, and it had been dyed in different sort of bright colors, and I decided, you know what, these are perfect for some coral thingamajig that would grow on the bottom of a sea or on the ship. So I basically took some very small sort of pieces, and then I just, yeah, you can see here, I decided to speed that up. I just sort of broke it apart into small itty bitty pieces. Finally, the moment of truth. I'm gluing the bastard to the ship, and it looks nice. And then putting some super glue in, putting some lichen in there. And at this point, I think it's time to have a look at the end result. Alright, good people, that's all for this week. If you like what you saw, please comment down below. Tell me what you thought. As always, if you like what you saw, please consider subscribing or hitting that like button, sharing, to ensure that we can continue putting out these videos. And you know what? Perhaps we can bring more people to the channel. Until next time, adieu.